and Yamato, and I'm your host for today's half hour with discussing The Last of the Sea Women. I'm joined today by Sue Kim, director and producer of The Last of the Sea Women. Sue, welcome.
Hi, Jen. Thank you for having me.
Your film is such a tremendous documentary with a fascinating subject. It feels so urgent and timely, and it has just the most wonderful subjects at the heart of it. How would you describe your film and the world that it brings us into?
Well, I haven't figured out a very short synopsis, but basically, this film is about a community of women called the Haenyeo. The Haenyeo live on this island off the coast of South Korea called Jeju Island, and they are a community of women that have existed for centuries, and they dive down to the ocean's floor to harvest marine life. And they've been doing so as breadwinners and as matriarchs of this island, and their work has supported their families, it supported the island, and it was basically like 80% of the economic revenue of this island for centuries. So they're really kind of like the first working women of Asia, but just a really inspirational, strong, empowered female culture.
Fantastic. And we're going to start off by playing the trailer for The Last of the Sea Women.
우리 제주에는 유명한 게 세 가지가 있는데 돌, 바람, 여자. 해녀는 바다에 뛰어들어 우리 수만으로 해산물을 채취하는 게 우리 해녀라. 해녀가 된다는 것은 소명이라. 바다의 수호자이고 우리는 수백 년 동안 바다를 지켜와서
없어질 것 같지만
우리 소중한 해녀 문화를 계속 이어가야 돼.
자 출발 렛츠고 멋진 어르신들처럼 해녀들처럼 이렇게 오래오래 건강하게 물질하고 싶습니다.
60년 해야. 해녀 삶이 이렇게 어렵게 살아서 이제 이만이 살았는데 내 바다를 내가 지켜야죠.
Off the coast of South Korea, a neighboring country is beginning the release of radioactive wastewater into the ocean.
이제는 옛날 같지 않아서 밖에 나가서 해녀하는 사람들도 없어.
우리의 삶이 터져는 일렁구나.
그렇죠. 그 사람들이 알겠지.
결코 이거 못하게 해야 우리가 원칙이라.
우리도 싸울 겁니다. 끝까지.
The trailer gives us such a great idea of, just a sense of the highs of this lifestyle, this wonderful community, and the relationship that they have with the ocean, the traditions and legacies that they continue, but also some of the extreme challenges that they face. So I wonder if you could start us off by just, how did you first come to learn about the Haenyeo and their legacy, their way of life? When did they first cross your radar?
So I basically grew up the extreme ultimate fan of the Haenyeo. I first saw them in person when I was 8 years old. I went back to Korea with my family for the first time, and we decided to take a little trip down to Jeju Island because Jeju is kind of like the Hawaii of Korea. So we thought we'd have like this fun sort of tropical vacation, and we were walking along the coastline, and we got kind of close to this cove area, and all of a sudden we ran into this large gaggle of women, and it was the Haenyeo, and they were all in their black and orange wetsuits, and they were putting on their masks, and I was so struck by them immediately, mostly because they were so incredibly loud. They were like yelling at each other, and it seemed like they're fighting with each other, but at the same time they were laughing too, and they kind of just gave off this energy that I hadn't yet seen before, where it's just like a very bold, fearless, strong, kind of tough energy. And I was 8 years old and I had no idea who they were, what they did, but I immediately resonated with that confidence, that fearlessness. And at that time, I was kind of a tomboyish young 8-year-old girl, and I didn't quite kind of fit into the notion of how ladylike I was supposed to be according to my mom or my aunts. So I saw them and I kind of recognized a new version of Korean womanhood that I felt like, oh, I get them. I could aspire to be like them. They're like my tribe, or like they're my sorting hat would put me in that house. Whatever they do, those are my people. And so I became super fascinated with them starting from that day. I remember going back home to my home in Michigan and checking out a book about them because I just wanted to find out everything I could about them. And so I stayed just generally really fascinated with the Haenyeo culture as I grew up. Again, just trying to get my hands on any kind of material I could to find out more about them and about the history. And I eventually started going back down to Jeju as an adult to try and find them again. So I had a few trips to Jeju under my belt, and a few times I'd met them and was able to speak with them. And it was about 10 years ago. I was on another trip down to Jeju. I was there with my mom, and we were looking for another Haenyeo community. And we found one that was diving, and we waited for someone to come out of the water. And there was an 84-year-old Haenyeo that came out of the water first. So we started talking to her, and I couldn't help but ask her, where are the younger Haenyeo at? Because I could see all of her fellow Haenyeo that were in the water, but they all looked like grandmas. So I just wanted to know, where were the younger women? And she's the one that told us, kind of very bluntly, she just said, this is it. We are the last generation of the Haenyeo. There are no more younger women coming up after us. So I think that's the moment where I had probably toyed with the idea of making a film about the Haenyeo for years. At that moment, though, once I heard that they were on the verge of extinction and that this culture might vanish, it became more of an urgent mandate of like, someone has to document this culture while they're still here, while we can show who they are and what they mean to Korean culture and their relationship to the ocean, but also more importantly, like, it felt very important to me that they themselves would be able to tell their story and their history in their own words. So that's really what prompted the making of this film. It took quite a long time to actually get it made and get funding for it, but it was 10 years of attempting to make this film and then finally making it.
Well, your film is going to, I think, introduce so many people to this community, and a lot of people will not realize perhaps that these women are free diving. They're diving for so long, just holding their breaths. They're incredibly athletic and working, as you say, up until their 80s even. What's one quality of these women that you think people will be most surprised to learn?
I mean, whenever I talk about the Haenyeo with people, I do mention the free diving and that historically they've been doing this for centuries, and that they were like the original kind of working women of Asia, certainly the original working women of Korea. The thing that always surprises people is the age of the current generation. I think, when we think of free divers, you don't automatically think of 80-year-olds as being able to free dive, but these women have been doing this for 5, 6 decades sometimes. And so they've really built this incredible physical agility and physical endurance to be able to do this work. And so it's startling because you'll see these women on ground, and like sometimes they're kind of hunched over, or they walk a little slower, or if they're hiking they have to stop and take rests, and they're breathing pretty heavily, just kind of like how you would expect elderly women to be. But then the minute you see them enter the water, it's a whole different ballgame. They sort of transform into these very graceful, strong, quick agile athletes almost. And so that's shocking. That seems to be the thing that is most surprising, is how physically strong and agile they are underwater, even though you just saw them as sort of elderly grandmas on ground.
And one aspect of their way of life that I loved to hear about in your film was the financial independence that this profession has brought them. It's something that is just like really cool about these women, and like perhaps it's something that got them into it years ago, but there's so much within the community and the bonds and this lifestyle that keeps them in it.
Yeah.
How difficult or perhaps surprisingly easy was it for you to start documenting these women and getting to know them and establishing trust with them to be the one to tell their story?
So it's actually very difficult to make contact with the Haenyeo communities. So the Haenyeo communities, it's not like one large Haenyeo community on the island of Jeju. It's made up of like over 30 different Haenyeo communities, because the Haenyeo communities, they are attached to the fishing villages along the coast. So they're all very separate from each other. And making contact with them is a little bit difficult. They're a little bit insular. They're very rural. They don't have email, but most of them don't have computers. So it's a lot of personal visits. I was really lucky because I got to work with this production company in Korea, and they had this wonderful woman on their team that was a researcher, and she had done quite a lot of work with NGOs in the past. And so that she is the one that reached out to some of her NGO contacts, on Jeju Island, and a couple of them had worked on projects with certain Haenyeo communities. So she was able to kind of get us our first entry to speak to a Haenyeo community in a specific fishing village. And then once we kind of made contact with that first community, they would, someone could introduce us to another community. And so we ended up spending 2 weeks going all around the island of Jeju, visiting about 15 different Haenyeo communities. And really, once we established the contact with them, it was quite easy to talk to them. We basically would just visit them in their village. In Korean culture, it's very polite and common we bring some gifts of like vitamins or like fruit juices and things. And then you just sit in their living rooms and you talk, and we mostly just asked questions. And so once we were able to establish that contact, it was actually very easy to get them to want to be involved in the film. And the reason why, I think, is because all of the Haenyeo that we spoke to, many of them wanted to speak about what was happening to the ocean, about the environmental destruction of the marine life that only they could see, because they're in the water every single day, year after year. People that aren't doing that underwater work, we can't really see what's happening with climate change and global warming and sea pollution, but they can. So it was almost like once they realized that they might have a platform to speak about this, they were very eager to be involved. And they also, many of them wanted to sort of correct a certain narrative that happened to be out there about Haenyeos that was often portrayed in media outlets in a way that they didn't feel was representative of who they really were, which is there's this kind of like stereotypical sad grandma narrative there. A lot of news organizations will kind of do news pieces about the Haenyeo and talk about how sad it is that 84-year-old grandmas have to work in the ocean every day in order to survive and make ends meet. And so many of the Haenyeo that I spoke to, they wanted to correct that and just actually talk about how proud they are of the work that they do. I had one Haenyeo, like basically she said, "We're not sad grandmas, we are warriors of the ocean." And it was so evident that they take such great joy and pride in that work, and that their relationship to the ocean and their relationship to this work. It's not occupational, it's not transactional, it's like a spiritual relationship. So just talking to them about that and kind of convincing them that I would, in the making of this film, I promised to give them their agency and their power back. Once we had those conversations, they were very, very eager to be part of the film.
Mm. And also, I want to get into the filmmaking of this, you know, the way that you depict the world. There's such beautiful underwater photography as you follow, your cameras follow the Haenyeo into, it's like going to work with them, you know? And we have a great clip that we're going to play that I think kind of gives viewers a nice snapshot of this world.
난 해녀라. 해녀는 바다에 뛰어들어 우리 수만으로 해산물을 채취하는 게 우리 해녀라. 해녀들은 바다가 우리 터전이거든. 어머님 품만 갖고 편안해. 하지만 그 이상이지. 해녀가 된다는 것은 소명이라. 해녀는 바다의 수호자이고 우리는 수백 년 동안 바다를 지켜와서
So I love that because it's like literally we're following them into this beautiful world. Like most of us stay above land at all times and we'll never see the views that these women get on a daily basis. What was your approach to sharing and bringing us into their world in terms of the kinds of visuals and the textures and the sounds that we hear?
I mean, as far as the underwater cinematography, it was very, very important that I wanted to show who these women were underwater. Again, because there's quite a different juxtaposition of who they are above ground and in the water. And you can see in the water, they're so graceful. And what I found so fascinating is just how quick and adept they are at catching the marine life. They know exactly what to get, what to look for. When I was watching the underwater footage, things just look like rocks to me, but they knew exactly what were rocks or what were stone sea pineapples or what were conches. And I found that to be so fascinating. But it was really important to me to show a lot of their underwater world because that's really where they come to life. You know, that is their relationship to work, that's their relationship to the ocean, that's what they take pride in, that's the craft that they have honed over decades and decades and decades. So and also that's part of what makes them so exceptional and remarkable is that they can do this work so gracefully and with such strength and ease and still be 90 years old. So that woman that we were following in that clip, she's 90 years old. And so it's just you have to see it to believe it.
I wanted to ask about your executive producer, Malala Yousafzai, the Nobel Peace Prize winner. She her production company extracurricular made this their first project. Yeah. What was it that that brought you together to work on this? And I mean, the film has such a strong streak of activism. It feels so urgent. It feels like a call to action. Tell me about that.
Yeah. Working with Malala was just pretty much the greatest gift and the greatest circumstance that could have happened to our film. So basically, I had tried for 2, maybe 3 years to get this film made. And I basically could not get funding for it. I met with lots of people, lots of production companies and streamers that were interested in the story. I think everybody recognized that the Haenyeo culture is unique and interesting, and it's a very, a story worth telling. But I couldn't get any partnership with anyone because the feedback I received pretty consistently was that it was a very niche story and it lacked broad commercial appeal. So that was sort of the biggest hindrance to getting this film made. And so I actually had to kind of put it away for a while. I just kept getting no's and like closed doors. And I started a different project. And then Malala had just started extracurricular productions, and the president of her company is a woman named Erica Kinnear. She reached out to me on email because she had seen an earlier film I'd made called The Speed Cubers. She really liked that film, and so she just wanted to kind of become acquainted with me and find out. Well, she asked me in this email the best question ever, which was, are there any stories that you're dying to tell? And so, of course, immediately I'm like, yes, there is a story I've been trying to get made for years, and I just can't seem to. And so I met with her and Malala, and basically it could not have been a more fortuitous meeting because Malala is this beloved humanitarian that is known for her activism on behalf of the rights for girls and women. And our story, the story of the Haenyeo, it's all about female empowerment and financial independence and this matriarchal community. So there's this very similar DNA that of ideology that was running through the Haenyeo film and running through Malala's activism in her company. So it was like an immediate perfect fit. And then the minute Malala and Extracurricular came on board to partner with me on this, all of a sudden doors started opening, and we immediately met with A24 to become a production partner, and they came on board right away. And then the three of us all pitched to Apple because Malala's production company has a first look deal with Apple. And to Apple's credit, they also immediately came on board. They instantly recognized the value of telling this story. So the luck for this movie completely changed once Malala came on board. And I give her so much credit for being willing to lend her voice, her activism, her reputation on behalf of this film to help get it made. And the partnership has been just truly ideal ever since. She's really trusted me creatively to run with the creative, but then anything that is needed for the film with regards to promotions, or she kind of helped us get filming permission to film at the UN. It's been, doors have opened and we've been given opportunities because of our partnership with her. So it's been incredible.
You mentioned filming at the UN, and that's something I wanted to ask you about because first of all, the film is such a beautiful portrait of this community of women, but then as you're filming, it takes these fascinating sort of pathways. In one direction is this younger generation of YouTube Haenyeo who's come into the fold, and that's a really joyful and lovely intergenerational aspect. But we also travel to Geneva with one of your Haenyeo to give a very, very, very important address to the UN. What was it like for these two sort of directions to present themselves while you were filming?
I think they're both really important parts of the story. So basically, the central thesis of this film is documenting this incredible culture and community of women, but it's also investigating and exploring the different existential threats that are jeopardizing this culture from continuing on. And so one of the threats is there's a sort of lack of interest in younger women in taking on this work. Like younger women, it's a very physically arduous job. And nowadays they want to be influencers and social media brand ambassadors. And so it's been hard to kind of get this younger generation interested in it. So working with the younger Haenyeo subjects, that was incredible because they showed an example of how younger women can come to this profession and make it modern and make it work for their lives. And what I loved about their storyline is that both Sohee and Jungmin are younger Haenyeos. They came to this ancient culture for very postmodern reasons. So Sohee came to it because she was working in a windowless cubicle for 8 years. She had digital exhaustion. She was just very uninspired and experienced burnout from this like office life. And then she found the Haenyeo culture and it connected her to nature and it connected her to the ocean. And it gave her um, this new occupation that felt so much more rewarding to her. And then Jungmin similarly came to this ancient culture for a very postmodern reason, which is that she's a working mom and she wanted to work. She wanted an occupation that would give her the flexibility to make her own hours and create a work schedule that worked with her family life. So I loved that they took this ancient culture and made it work for their postmodern dilemmas. And then they turned it into a social media channel as well. So all of that I just found so inspiring about how do we preserve our ancient cultures and still live in our modern times. I think they created this perfect answer. And then their subject, our Chung Soon-jok Haenyeo subject that went to the UN to deliver that speech, she's also addressing an existential threat, which is the environmental destruction of the ocean and the marine life, which is directly impacting the Haenyeo's ability to keep doing this work. And so, I knew before we started filming, the Japanese government had announced that they were going to release the radioactive treated wastewater from Fukushima. So we knew that that was going to be an environmental crisis that may have intersected with our Haenyeo subjects. What we didn't know is that they would become so motivated and so galvanized to take action that they would literally become activists throughout the filming of the story. And what I found so beautiful is that it was just kind of life happening. They decided to be activists. They took part in this Jeju protest. They became the spokespeople for this Jeju protest. And because of the Korean news media coverage of this protest, this NGO that is a kind of conservationist NGO at the UN, they found out about Jung Soon-dok's speech at that rally, and they invited her to speak on behalf of the Haenyeo. Those are the kinds of things you can't plan for in documentary filmmaking. It's just the kind of thing that happens organically, and it was such a inspiring, even though it was difficult for her to make that journey and to give that speech, it was such an inspiring turn of events that we were just so privileged to be able to follow, and provided a really nice kind of climactic moment of this is how much they're willing to go through in order to speak up on behalf of the ocean and in order to pass on a cleaner ocean to their descendants. So yeah, I feel like that was just fate, and I'm not surprised that our Haenyeo rose to the challenge to meet it.
It's such a galvanizing part of the film, which is so inspiring. We are almost out of our half hour with you. So I have one final question, and that is for someone who hasn't yet had a chance to see The Last of the Sea Women, if there's one thing about this documentary that you would think might encourage somebody to check it out, what would that be?
I mean, to me, I think the value and the gold nugget of the story is our Haenyeo subjects. And the one thing I would say is, in the making of this film, I really wanted to be able to portray a different kind of hero. And so I think in our film, you do and you will see a different kind of hero. So, firstly, all of the heroes in this film are women. Secondly, also a very rare instance is all of the heroes in our film are Asian women. And thirdly, and this is the part that I really love, is all of the heroes in our film are elderly Asian women. So if you are interested in seeing a different kind of narrative, if you're interested in seeing a different kind of epic, heroic storyline with different characters, namely elderly Asian grandmas, watch our film because you'll see that to me they are as heroic and epic as Marvel comic book heroes. They are as larger than life as the more kind of stereotypical heroes that you see in Hollywood.
Thank you so much to our friends at Apple Original Films and to Sue for joining us today.
Thanks so much, Jen. It was so wonderful speaking with you.
And to everyone watching, thank you for joining us today for Half Hour With.